Well, since I'm holding this microphone and I'm not tethered to these microphones of the pulpit, do you mind if I step a little bit closer to you? I'm going to take the liberty of stepping a little bit closer to you to share a few thoughts about the Torah portion, if that's okay. Thank you. And I'd like to share a few thoughts with you about the story we know so well. The Torah portion this week is the Torah portion Vayeshev, which starts in Genesis chapter 37. And it's the Torah portion that's dominated by the early life of Joseph. It starts out with the phrase Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Canaan. Joseph's father, Jacob, was residing in Canaan, and immediately it goes into the offspring of Jacob. And right within the first verse, Vayosef ben 17 shana, Joseph was 17 years old, and the whole story that unfolds is really the story of Joseph. And we know the story of Joseph, and we don't need to really retell the story of Joseph. But it may be helpful for us to rethink about the story of Joseph, and there are maybe elements of the story of Joseph we don't really think about. So the overall outlines of the story of Joseph, we know. Joseph annoyed his brothers, and his brothers didn't like him and grew to hate him, and eventually hated him so much that when he went looking for them and found them, they undressed him, threw him into a pit, and eventually sold him on to slavery to Midianites, who took him to Egypt. Toward the end of the Torah portion, Joseph is in Egypt, and the very end of the Torah portion in Vayeshev is Joseph having been forgotten in prison. That's a great story. But it's also a hopeful story, because that's not the end of the story. We know what happens in the next week's Torah portion, and somehow something happens that alters the dynamic of the early story of Joseph. But when we read the story of Joseph, there are all these other elements that come in that, generally speaking, we don't think about. Jacob and his family reside in the city of Hebron. And according to this story, after Joseph, we learn, is 17 years old and has been annoying his brothers and has been increasingly hated by his brothers, the brothers go off with a herd to Shechem, to Nablus, and Jacob says to Joseph, "Would you please go up to your brothers and see how they're doing, and look after the peace of your brothers, and see how everything is going?" And Joseph says, "Hineni, here I am. Send me. Let me go." And it's lovely, it's wonderful that Joseph would go off to see his brothers and see how things are going, and that things are going well, except that Hebron is approximately 90 kilometers from Nablus, 55 miles. And Joseph is going around in his multicolored coat on his own, 55 miles. This 17-year-old was sent by his father to go 55 miles from the middle of the Judean desert, Hebron, to Nablus. I don't know what you're thinking about this, but I know what my wife would tell me if I were to send my teenager just go walk to Nablus. Maybe you'll find them. Look after their peace. We read this part of the story and we think to ourselves, what was he thinking? This is dangerous. Not only that, he's going with his multicolored coat. Who's wearing multicolored coats? It's in the desert, between Hebron and Nablus. It's like it's as if he's holding a sign. Look at me, I'm on my own, walking out here in the wilderness. Goes off to Nablus. And lo and behold, the brothers are not there. There's no one there. He's looking and looking. He can't find them. And then he encounters an ish, according to the biblical passage. Rashi, the commentator, believes that he encountered the angel Gabriel. But this encounter of the ish, of this person, in this encounter, the person says, "What are you looking for? You're on your own here. What are you looking for?" And he says, "I have come looking for my brothers." Et ahai avakesh. I am coming looking for brotherhood. I am coming looking for my brothers. Now, between Jacob sending Joseph out to seek the peace of his brothers, and Joseph now telling us he is seeking his brothers, we are perhaps, according to the rabbis, starting to understand the state of mind of Joseph. Joseph perhaps is looking to repair the relationship with his brothers. He is perhaps really looking for them, looking for the opportunity to get back with his brothers. The brothers are not there. And this man says, "Oh, I overheard something. They went off to a place called Dotan. Vayelchu Dotaina. They went to a place called Dotan." Now, Dotan, that's very nice that they went somewhere else. That's another 20 miles up north. For you to understand, Hebron is in the middle of the Judean desert. Nablus is in Samaria. And Dotan, the valley of Dotan, is near the current Palestinian city of Jenin, in the very north of the West Bank. That's another 20 miles. So this child, this 17-year-old child, goes another 20 miles up north. Do you know how long it takes to walk 70, 75 miles? Well over a day. Without eating, drinking, stopping, sleeping, well over a day. Great. Right? And he arrives to see his brothers, and even before he comes near them, Terem Yikrav, it says, before he ever comes near the brothers, Vayitnaklu oto lahamito. They conspired, they decided, they determined to kill him. And of course, the rest of the story follows. They come upon him, they undress him, they throw him into the pit. We may ask all kinds of questions. They were going to Shechem. Their father Jacob sent the brothers to Shechem with a herd. Why did they not stay in Shechem? Why did they have to go further up north? What were they doing going up north? I mean, there's a whole number of questions that we may ask ourselves. But I want us to think about this story for a moment and think about a few learnings that we may gather from this story. Learnings with regard to this dysfunctional story. Learnings that we may gather with regard to this story of strife and of terrible injustice that is eventually done to Joseph. In fact, I think I want to share with you 7 insights into this story. First, as the story unfolds, we think to ourselves, what is Jacob thinking? Sending this child onto the world, this 17-year-old, to walk on his own to find his brothers. And the story delivers to us a message, and the message is, wait a minute, let's think about where the real danger is. Is the danger really in the environment? Is it really outside? Is it really out there? Or is it among the people who are closest to Joseph? Among the people with whom he really is in relationship? Among those people whom really he ought to trust, who at the end of the day are his siblings, or the people he ought to be able to rely upon. Where is the danger here in the story? What do we learn about danger and where danger lurks? That's insight number 1. Insight number 2. Joseph may be going out there with a view to meeting his brothers and maybe reconciling with them. After all, he's going on a mission to look after the peace of his brothers. But the brothers have moved on. The siblings have moved on. The siblings won't even listen to him. Before he's ever come near them, they have already decided what they're going to do. In other words, this is a story of complete and tragic misalignment. A misalignment between Joseph and his brothers. One side of the story, here Joseph is thinking, I'm just going to go see my brothers. Maybe I can repair this. The other side will have nothing to do with it. Had Jacob known, would he have sent Joseph? Had Joseph known, would he have gone, given this misalignment? There's a third insight that emerges out of this story. In the context of this dysfunction and of what really starts to emerge here as a Greek tragedy before the story gets better. What if? What if? What if Joseph had found his siblings in Shechem, a big city with lots of people, and maybe the brothers and their herds would not be secluded somewhere in the countryside because they were surrounded with people. They might not have been able to do what they had really wanted to do because they'd be seen by other people. They'd be discovered. What if they had remained in Shechem? What if they had remained in Nablus? What if he had not met that person that guided Joseph to his brothers in Dothan, another 20 miles up north? What if the story had unfolded differently? What if he had returned home saying to his father, oh, sorry, I couldn't find them. I tried my best. I couldn't find them. What if? What if? We don't know. There's yet another learning here that I think is a significant learning. What do we make of the brothers? The brothers were on their own, going out to care for their herds. And all of them agreed that they hated Joseph, that he was awful, that he was terrible, that Joseph was the problem. And that at the end of the day, what we needed to do was to get rid of the problem. Get rid of Joseph. Joseph is a problem. Get rid of Joseph. Everything will be fine. You know, we often think like this. She's the problem. He's the problem. Get rid of them. We can fix this. Everything is going to be okay. Yeah, Saddam Hussein is a problem. Get rid of Saddam Hussein. Iraq will be a wonderful Western democracy. Everything will go great. Just get rid of Saddam Hussein. Everything. Gaddafi is the problem. Get rid of Gaddafi. Right? Everything will be okay. We can fix this. Just get rid of the problem. Fix the problem. Right? And it's a kind of groupthink. Oh, yeah, we know. This guy, not right. Let's fix this. Let's get rid of this guy. But groupthink is not always good think. And sometimes this kind of echo chamber thinking, coupled with the opportunity and the power and the agency to act, can cause real harm. It did to Joseph. That's yet another insight. And then there is yet one more thing I want to share with you, I want to raise with us. The unintended consequences. Everything was going to be fine. We were going to get rid of Joseph, and the brothers were thinking, Dad will get over it. Jacob will get over it. Everything will be good. He will love us more. We will be better treated. The family will come back together because this guy will be out of the picture. Okay, we can get over this. Yeah, we're going to be in kind of a crisis, but if we stick to our guns, we stick to our story, we do our thing, everything will be okay. The consequences will be good. But the consequences didn't work out quite the way they thought these consequences might work out. Jacob fell into depression, into mourning he could not emerge out of. The dysfunction of the family was not resolved. There was not more love for the brothers. Things didn't quite work out the way they thought they might work out. There are unintended consequences. And sometimes they could be foreseen, and other times they're difficult to foresee. And it's just the way things are. But at the end of the day, there is yet another lesson to the Joseph story. Joseph is done a terrible injustice. Joseph is oppressed, ejected from the family, sold to slavery, and is completely out of the picture now. But somehow, mysteriously, things work out. There is yet another lesson to the Joseph story. And the lesson is that even in the worst of crisis, within a family, within any setting wherein people are close, in the context of the greatest pain, in the context of the greatest of difficulties, in the context of the greatest of darkness, even when we can't quite see it, somehow there is still hope. Who would have thought that Joseph would rise to prominence? Who would have thought that the family would reunite? Who would have thought that Joseph would be the source of redemption for the rest of his family? Who would have thought that things would turn in completely unforeseen and unpredictable ways. The lesson of our story is hope. Even when we can't quite see how things are going to work out. We are about to light the first candle of Hanukkah on Sunday evening. And here is what I ask of you this Shabbat. Light a candle for yourself and for the world in the midst of darkness. Light a candle of hope, of goodness in the midst of confusion. Light a candle for the future in the midst of our present. Light a candle of Hanukkah and see that candle of Hanukkah turn into 2 candles and 3 candles and 4 candles and experience the light of the coming week increase. And may this light of Shabbat and the light of Hanukkah and the light and the hope of the Joseph story inspire us in the midst of this winter, in the midst of the dark, and in the midst of so much dysfunction that we so often experience around us. There is always light. There must always be light. There must always be hope. Shabbat Shalom.